Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the fog-draped forests of 19th century Bavaria. You're perched in a carriage bumping along muddy roads, pine trees looming above like cathedral spires, the damp seeping through your boots. Ahead, past the mist, sits a lonely castle that hasn't been built yet. It's the dream of a boy who'd rather be drawing swans than preparing for war, who hides behind velvet curtains to avoid awkward conversations, and who one day, spoiler alert, will blow a royal fortune on a mountain fantasy that he won't even live to see completed. You probably won't survive this journey not because it's dangerous, but because the sheer amount of candlelit melancholy and wallpaper drama might lull you into a permanent nap. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not born into a fairy tale. You're born into an old drafty Bavarian castle in 1845, with walls that echo too much, and adults who speak too little. Ludwig is your name. Your full title is a mouthful, but for now, you're just a quiet kid with cold hands and a big imagination. You grow up in Hohenschwangau Castle, which sounds romantic, but mostly means you play in rooms filled with tapestries of knights slaying dragons while your parents argue in the next chamber. Your father, King Maximilian II, is a stern intellectual with a taste for ancient languages and practical governance. Your mother, Queen Marie, is noble, distant, and devoted to hiking in the Alps. You prefer staring at the painted ceiling, wondering how many stars you could fit in a real throne room if you were in charge. You have a younger brother, Otto, who plays by himself too and will later have his own sad chapter. But that's another bedtime story. For now, it's just you, Ludwig, wandering halls too big for your voice and sketching castles on parchment when you're supposed to be practicing court etiquette. Even as a child, you feel like you don't quite belong here. Servants whisper about your strange ways. You talk to portraits, hum arias to yourself, and spend hours watching the swans glide silently across the lake below the castle windows. You imagine they speak to you. They do not. But you pretend they do, because pretending feels warmer than reality. You're taught how to bow, how to ride, how to address minor nobles by their very specific titles. You hate all of it. You're supposed to attend balls, but the music is never Wagner, and there are too many conversations about politics and poultry prices. So you retreat. Into books. Into poetry. Into myths of heroic kings and enchanted castles. At night, when the fires in the hearth crackle low and shadows flicker across the ceiling, you imagine yourself as a noble ruler not of this world, but of some misty dream realm, a place where you never have to give a speech or make a policy decision. Just ride through the clouds and vanish behind marble arches. Your teachers grow frustrated. You excel at memorizing epic poetry but fail to show interest in military drills. You doodle Gothic spires in your margins instead of calculating the logistics of tax reform. When asked about matters of the state, you shrug and say you'd rather be reading the legends of Parsifal. By the time you're a teenager, you're fluent in French, Latin, and the language of operatic tragedy. You are not, however, fluent in small talk or political compromise. You've developed a habit of responding to awkward questions with long silences or abrupt, dreamlike monologues. No one finds this charming, except perhaps the swans. One summer evening, you overhear the advisors discussing your future. Your father is aging. The ministers are sharpening their agendas. They talk about your unsuitability, your fragility. They whisper phrases like mentally delicate, which in royal terms is the emotional equivalent of being handed a very polite sword and asked to fall on it. You're 15 when you first see Richard Wagner's opera Lohengrin. It's a revelation. A knight arrives, in a boat pulled by a swan. He saves a damsel, sings like thunder in velvet, and then vanishes tragically because someone asked him one too many questions. You cry. Not just because it's beautiful, but because it's you. All of it. You are the swan knight. You are the operatic escape plan. From then on, you're obsessed. Wagner becomes your imaginary best friend. You study his librettos, send him letters, memorize entire passages. You even begin staging little productions in your bedroom using puppets, candlelight, and some very confused footmen. Historians still argue whether your obsession with Wagner was purely artistic or something deeper. Some say it was romantic admiration. Others claim it was a cry for connection from a boy who never learned how to form ordinary attachments. Either way, one thing's clear. Reality is no longer your primary residence. Your father notices. He does not approve. When you finally meet Wagner in person, he is charming, dramatic, and broke. You find this delightful. Your father does not. He begins to quietly fund Wagner's temporary exile, hoping to end the influence. It doesn't work. By the time you're 18, you've fully outgrown the corridors of Hohenschwangau. You want space to dream real space, with towers and turrets and drawbridges. You look out at the distant mountains and think, yes, that's where I'll build it, my castle in the clouds. Your father dies unexpectedly, and you're crowned King of Bavaria almost overnight. You are 18, awkward, unprepared, and now technically the ruler of an increasingly irrelevant German kingdom caught between Prussia, Austria, and about 6 dozen political headaches. And what's your first thought as king? You really want to build a fairy tale castle. You are 18, crowned with a borrowed crown that feels too heavy for your neck, standing in a cold stone hall as courtiers murmur Latin and fidget with gloves. The ceremony is full of grandeur, but your mind is somewhere else, half in the clouds above the Alps, half in the pages of an opera libretto where everything has structure and beauty and nobody asks you to settle border disputes. You're King Ludwig II of Bavaria now. But don't get too excited, this isn't a real monarchy like in the old days. Bavaria is technically independent. Yes, but your power is mostly ceremonial. The ministers run the state. The real politic belongs to Berlin and Vienna. Your job is to wear nice buttons and not offend the Kaiser. Unfortunately, you're already bored. You try to play along at first. You attend meetings. You sit through dull debates about grain tariffs and forestry rights. You nod gravely when older men with impressive mustaches explain military budgets to you. But your eyes glaze over, and your doodles in the margins of government reports become more elaborate. Dragons curling around turrets, lonely towers perched on cliffs, swans drifting through misty lakes. The press starts calling you the Dream King. At first, it's a compliment. Then it becomes a joke. Eventually, it's a warning. You retreat, gently and politely, from politics. You're never rude, just absent. Ministers knock on your door and are told you're indisposed. Letters go unanswered. Instead, you read romantic poetry by candlelight, commission new paintings of mythic knights, and dream of castles that haven't been built yet. You begin designing your first fantasy refugiano, a palace for ruling, but a sanctuary from the modern world. Neuschwanstein. It means new swanstone, because you're subtle like that. The location? A dramatic cliff overlooking a narrow valley, just a stone's throw from your childhood home. You want it high, remote, surrounded by fog and fir trees and absolutely no parliamentarians. You don't hire architects. Not really. You hire theater set designers, stage painters, and opera decorators. The goal is not practicality. The goal is aesthetic escapism. You sketch towers that are too tall to build, halls with ceilings that seem to vanish into the stars. Every angle must evoke a dream you once had or a Wagner scene you've cried over. Your advisors are deeply concerned. The budget is fluid. There are no strategic reasons to build here. The roads don't reach it. The rock beneath it is questionable, and the mountains are cold and unforgiving. But you don't care. You're not building for them. You're building for Parsifal, for Lohengrin, for you. Sometimes you ride out alone on horseback just to stand on the site where it will rise. You stare into the mist and see it already gleaming white stone, high towers, the cry of a distant eagle echoing through the valley. You whisper lines from Wagner's operas under your breath and imagine them bouncing off the future battlements. And yes, the swans are there too. Always the swans. Historians still argue whether you ever intended Neuschwanstein to be finished in the traditional sense. Was it always meant to be a shell, a symbol, a personal theater set for one man's inner world? Or did you truly believe you'd live there, like a king of old, surrounded by loyalty and legends? Your brother Otto, meanwhile, grows quieter, more withdrawn. Some say you two speak less and less. Others say you were the only person who understood him. But that sadness simmers in the background. For now, you focus on building and dreaming and disappearing. Your ministers begin to panic. They try to distract you with diplomatic tasks. They hope you'll take an interest in marrying a nice noblewoman, maybe forge an alliance or produce an heir. You smile faintly, nod, and then promptly commission a gold swan boat for the palace pond. You do try once, briefly, to play the marriage game. You become engaged to your cousin, Sophie Charlotte. She's kind, smart, and genuinely fond of you. But she is not Parsifal. She is not Lohengrin. You cancel the engagement with a sorrowful letter, explaining that your soul belongs to higher, purer things. Everyone pretends to be surprised. No one really is. More and more, your daylight hours vanish. You start sleeping during the day and living at night. You ride through moonlit forests alone, draped in furs, reciting poems to trees. You become a ghost king always present, yet never quite seen. Neuschwanstein's foundation is finally laid. The first stones are hauled up the mountain. Workers grumble. Engineers sigh. Ministers sweat. You hum happily, flipping through sketches of the throne room ceiling, which you've decided will feature a glowing sunburst made entirely of gold leaf. One advisor tries to reason with you. He talks about Bavaria's reputation, about money, about diplomacy. You smile and thank him for his concern. Then you ask him whether he prefers bronze or silver chandeliers shaped like antlers. By now, Wagner has returned. You bring him back to Munich, cover his debts, build him a personal theater. The press is scandalized. Wagner is, as usual, brilliant, chaotic, and possibly manipulating your affections. But you don't care. He understands your dreams. You host private performances of Tristan and Isolde just for the two of you, in candlelit rooms filled with tapestries of star-crossed lovers. Every now and then you still sign documents. You still approve budgets, mostly for your own projects. But the ministers handle governance. You handle magic. That seems fair. Still, cracks begin to show. Not in the castle that's progressing, however slowly, but in your relationships. Your court becomes a tight bubble of chosen attendants and loyal servants. You stop appearing in public. You send ornate letters full of metaphors and obscure references. Some ministers say you've lost touch with reality. Others suspect you were never quite tethered in the first place. The people of Bavaria still love you. in their way. They joke about the fairy tale king. Tourists gather to glimpse your mysterious silhouette on midnight rides. Children claim to have seen your ghost wandering the castle halls before they were even built. And still, the mountain rises. Slowly, stubbornly. Neuschwanstein is becoming real. Not practical, not efficient, but real. And so are your legends. You wake just after sunset. The room is completely dark, except for the flicker of a single candle dancing in a silver holder, shaped like a swan. The velvet curtains are drawn. The air smells faintly of pine smoke and old stone, and someone has left your fur-lined riding cloak draped gently over a carved chair. You stretch, sigh, and prepare to rule the kingdom you never asked for by not ruling it at all. You are now in your early 20s, and technically, the most powerful person in Bavaria. But let's be honest, you haven't attended a cabinet meeting in months. You do sign things occasionally. Edicts, royal grants, the occasional theater license. But it's clear to everyone that you have little interest in statecraft. You've become a moonlit figure, more legend than monarch, drifting through your own reign like a baritone in an opera's second act. To be fair, Bavaria itself isn't exactly a thriving empire. It's a sleepy kingdom squeezed awkwardly between rising German nationalism to the north and collapsing old empires to the south. Otto von Bismarck is assembling Germany piece by piece like a very angry jigsaw puzzle, and you, Ludwig, are mostly worried about how many murals of swan knights you can fit into a corridor. Your ministers are not amused. Still, they can't deny your love ardor, at least tolerated with a sort of fond confusion. You don't tax the peasants into ruin. You don't send their sons to die in pointless wars. You don't parade through town demanding loyalty, oaths, or insist on statues of yourself. You just build. Fantastical castles, absurdly ornate bedrooms, and midnight opera stages in the forest. Neuschwanstein, though, is not just a rich boy's plaything. At least, not to you. It's your sanctuary, your masterpiece, your rebellion against the gray demands of the modern world. Where others see waste and whimsy, you see vision. You see escape. You spend hours, days, sometimes poring over sketches. You consult with artisans about wood grain for hand-carved balustrades, or the exact tint of blue in a ceiling mural depicting the cosmos. One of your artists faints from ladder fatigue painting a scene from Tannhäuser. You send him a fruit basket and commission a backup artist. The castle's progress is slow and expensive. The workers complain that the road is treacherous, the winters are brutal, and you keep changing your mind about the tower shapes. You politely acknowledge their concerns, then triple the budget for gold leaf in the throne room. The throne itself? Never delivered. You design a grand, empty platform with 7 marble steps leading to a sunburst ceiling, but no actual chair. Scholars still argue why. Was it symbolic? Was it an act of royal humility? Or had you simply not found a throne magnificent enough to match the room? Outside the castle, Germany is transforming. Bismarck is forging an empire. Bavaria is absorbed into the new German Empire in 1871. Your political relevance drops from limited to decorative. You sign a loyalty oath under pressure and receive a shiny new title, King of Bavaria and Prince of the German Empire. It sounds nice. It means almost nothing. You retreat even further. There are moments brief, strange, where you try to reclaim some control. You write dramatic letters to Bismarck, filled with florid language and romantic imagery. He does not respond. You issue royal decrees that your ministers quietly shelve. You suggest building a 4th castle, inspired by Versailles, only more Versailles. They begin to panic. And yet, despite all this, you're not malicious. You're not cruel, you're just not here. Not in the present, at least. You are a man who has constructed an emotional moat around himself, filled with swans and poetry and candlelight. Your relationship with the real world frays further. You begin eating alone. At odd hours. Meals are served to empty rooms because you don't want to see the servants. They wheel in elaborate platters, place them under domes of silver, and depart silently. Only then do you enter, robed like a medieval noble, and eat in silence beneath frescoes of medieval battles you wish you'd fought in. You write at midnight. You write letters to long-dead composers. You compose strange, dreamy monologues in your diary about purity and beauty and the corruption of modern life. And still, Neuschwanstein rieses. It's not your only project, by the way. There's Linderhof, a smaller palace tucked into a quiet valley, dripping in gold and mirrors and garden fountains. Then there's Herrenchiemsee, your grandest Versailles-inspired fantasy, built on an island, and so ridiculously ambitious it makes even your court architect sigh audibly in meetings. At this point, your spending is out of control. Your personal debts swell past 14 million marks, an absurd sum for the time. Bavaria can't legally pay them. Your ministers plead with you. You dismiss them with a gesture and go back to redesigning a corridor to better reflect mythic loneliness. And yet, you're not entirely alone. People begin whispering that you've surrounded yourself with actors, stable boys, eccentric confidants, and mysterious guests who come and go by moonlight. Whether any of these individuals were lovers is a subject historians still debate, usually with more curiosity than evidence. Some claim you were celibate, an idealist untouched by earthly concerns. Others say your loneliness masked a hidden life. The truth, as always, remains blurred. One thing is certain. The castle becomes a mirror, not a reflection of power, but of you, your joys, your fears, your desperate hunger for beauty, untouched by time. And what of your people? The farmers and merchants and townsfolk below? Well, they have mixed feelings. Some call you Unserkini, our dear little king. They tell stories of your midnight rides and your velvet coats. Others mutter about taxes and the madness of gold-trimmed bedposts. But none rise against you, because in a way, your dream is theirs too. Bavaria, with its cold winters and crumbling borders, suddenly has a symbol, Neuschwanstein. Even unfinished, it's a monument to something grander, something beyond politics and budgets, a kind of shared fantasy. Still, cracks are forming. You stop appearing in public entirely. Your hair grows long. You pace your halls for hours, mumbling fragments of poetry, composing imaginary dialogues with legendary kings. When people visit, they find you charming, odd, and increasingly unpredictable. One nobleman leaves a party early after you insist on showing him a series of marble toilets modeled after medieval thrones. You begin referring to Neuschwanstein as the temple of my soul. Your ministers begin referring to you as a national liability. But for now, they let you build, because somehow, despite everything, you're still their king. You don't just dream of castles anymore, you live in the architectural equivalent of your own dream logic. One where stone towers reach towards stars you'll never touch, and spiral staircases lead mostly to nowhere. Neuschwanstein isn't just being built, it's becoming a second body, a physical expression of everything you can't say in court. Every arch, every chandelier, every velvet curtain is you. And yet, you still don't live there. Construction lurches forward with the grace of a swan in a snowstorm. The workers labor through sleet, rain, and sheer vertical terrain. They blast into bedrock, haul massive stones up winding switchbacks, and swear under their breath in 3 dialects. You visit occasionally at night, of course wrapped in a dramatic cloak, examining the progress by lantern light and asking obscure questions like, "Will the moonlight fall just so?" On this archway come October. You've now diverted funds from your own private estates to keep the building going. This is important. You're not stealing from your people, you're borrowing from your inheritance, your personal coffers, your name. The state groans under the strain, but technically, the Bavarian government is not paying for the throne room mosaics. Technically. One day, you change the entire ceiling mural in the Hall of the Singers because the clouds feel too symmetrical. This means scaffolding must be re-erected, artisans recalled, and paint palettes remixed. No one argues. Not to your face. Historians still argue whether this was madness or genius or both. Was Ludwig II a visionary far ahead of his time, creating immersive art before the world knew the term? Or a lonely man retreating into fantasy so deep that he forgot he had a kingdom? Meanwhile, the world spins on. In Berlin, Bismarck tightens his grip. The German Empire flexes its industrial muscles. Railroads cut through ancient forests. Electricity hums along copper wires. Modernity is arriving fast, and you, Ludwig, are still trying to commission a hallway inspired by Arthurian legends and lit entirely by candles shaped like tiny griffins. The contrast becomes comical. Newspapers begin to report on your strange behavior. Cartoons mock your spending. Some ministers quietly wonder whether you should be politely removed from major decisions, whatever few decisions you're still allowed to make. And yet, they still need you. As a symbol. As a story. The fairy tale King of the Alps sells postcards. He stirs the romantic imagination of Europe. Even if you are, at this point, a mostly nocturnal creature who speaks to painted knights and refuses to appear at state functions. There's a new problem, though. One you hadn't anticipated. You hate people seeing your castle. Neuschwanstein was meant to be privata temple to your ideals, not a tourist attraction. But its fame is spreading. Travelers arrive from Munich, Vienna, even Paris. They hike up the mountain to watch the construction, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive king. You respond by increasing security, limiting access, and adding more locks. At one point, you seriously consider disguising yourself as a servant so you can explore your own castle without being observed. A few maids claim to have caught you rearranging candles at 3 a.m. in full ceremonial dress. Still, there's no denying it, something magical is happening. The castle, even unfinished, is breathtaking. Visitors write poems about it. Artists paint it. Children pretend they live there. The silhouette of Neuschwanstein against the mountain mist is unlike anything Europe has seen since the age of troubadours. Inside, it's a labyrinth of lavishness. The walls are lined with murals, depicting scenes from Tristan und Isolde, Parsifal, Lohengrin. Every corridor whispers with romance and legend. There's no throne, but there is a royal bedroom with an intricately carved canopy that took 14 artisans nearly 5 years to complete. You order secret doors, spiral staircases, hidden balconies. You obsess over acoustics, so the sound of footsteps fades away into hush. A private chapel is tucked into one wing. There's even a fake grotto, a dim, echoing cavern complete with artificial stalactites, a waterfall, and colored stage lighting to simulate moonlight. It looks like something from a particularly elaborate high school fantasy novel. You adore it. No one really knows how to respond. Some find it ridiculous. Others find it sublime. Tourists whisper as if in a church. Ministers shake their heads and whisper about debt. You continue drawing, planning, dreaming. You now spend most of your time at Linderhof, your smaller palace. There, you've had an artificial lake constructed, complete with swan boats and a golden peacock throne. Meals are delivered by dumbwaiter. The mirrors reflect mirrors until the room seems endless. You host no guests. When someone tries to talk to you about Neuschwanstein's mounting cost, you interrupt to ask whether the frescoes in the Hall of Heroes should include more mood. At this point, your contact with reality is sporadic at best. You still respond to letters, but only the ones that come on perfumed paper or quote poetry. You still ride, but only at dusk. You still rule, but only over your growing kingdom of fantasy, a place where nights never die and beauty never bends to practicality. You're building your own mythology in stone, and like all myths, it's both awe-inspiring and tragic. Still, you persist, because the dream isn't finished yet. You're up before the sun, though. Up is generous. You haven't slept. You've been wandering the corridors of Linderhof again, barefoot, silk dressing gown trailing behind you, whispering passages from Tannhäuser to a statue of Venus. Servants have stopped asking questions. They just nod and draw the curtains wider when the light creeps in, as if hoping the dawn might gently coax you back into the present. But today, your attention is fixed on something new. Sketches. Not finished rooms or old murals, but plans. Endless new plans. Scrolls of parchment laid out across your writing desk, corners curling, the ink still slightly damp. Today's obsession. The budget. Not to reduce it, of course. Don't be absurd. You're considering how best to expand it specifically to accommodate more swans and stars in Neuschwanstein's decor scheme. The numbers are outrageous, even by your standards. You barely blink. You call in one of your few trusted architects and ask genuinely, sleepily, if it would be possible to gild the entire dome of the ballroom with meteor dust. He coughs, unsure if this is a joke. You don't laugh. You never laugh at dreams. By now, you've become a walking contradiction. You speak little, but your letters are florid and dramatic. You hate public attention, but everything you build screams theatricality. You claim to long for solitude, yet you fill your halls with depictions of courtly love, operatic tragedy, and cosmic grandeur. The plans for Neuschwanstein now include a Sängersaal, the Hall of the Singers. It's enormous. It serves no political or practical function. Its sole purpose? To honor the medieval ideal of poetic gatherings, song contests, and mythic storytelling. It's like building a modern-day ballroom exclusively for fan fiction readings. But you are not joking. Not even a little. This is your rebellion against the dull, steel-gray world of industry and empire. This is your resistance to clocks and uniforms and the political charades of Berlin. Meanwhile, your ministers are sweating. They can't stop you, yet, but they're keeping a ledger, both of expenses and eccentricities. For instance, they've noted that you now travel almost exclusively at night, in unmarked carriages, sometimes dressed as a monk. They've noticed that you no longer dine with anyone, that your favorite pastime involves sitting silently in front of elaborate mechanical swans in your private fountain room. Historians still debate whether this was calculated eccentricity, untreated mental illness, or simply the natural result of someone who was never taught how to live in the real world. Most agree. You were not dangerous, just different. And your debts? Oh, the debts. You've borrowed from nearly every noble house in Bavaria. You've mortgaged your personal estates. You've offered royal titles in exchange for artistic materials. Some courtiers have started calling you the bankrupt Apollo. Still, the castle grows. At Neuschwanstein, the throne room is finally taking shape. Inspired by Byzantine churches and pure fantasy, it's designed like a celestial temple, soaring arches, a golden floor mosaic depicting the zodiac, marble steps that rise toward a non-existent throne. You pace there, barefoot sometimes, and murmur to the empty air. There's also the matter of the chandeliers. You demand that each one be shaped like a royal crown, dripping with hand-blown crystal and suspended from the ceiling like blessings from heaven. One crashes during installation. You are unbothered. You simply commission another larger this time. Outside, villagers are beginning to worry. Not about you exactly, but about the rumors. That you've gone mad. That you're summoning spirits. That the castle is cursed. That it will never be finished. You smile when you hear this. A curse is just another kind of story. And still, the money flows barely. You now owe more than the royal treasury has ever held. Your ministers plead. They draft warnings. They consider intervention. You write back, suggesting the walls of the royal bedchamber be inlaid with sapphires to reflect moonlight. They put the warning letters in a drawer and breathe into handkerchiefs. Your relationship with Wagner is growing more complicated too. You still admire him, still consider his music a kind of soul compass. But he's expensive, unpredictable, and politically explosive. You fund his opera house in Bayreuth. You write him passionate, rambling letters. But even he starts to distance himself. Perhaps he sees the descent before others do. Perhaps he simply runs out of metaphors. You don't seem to mind. Your letters grow longer, stranger. You sign them not as Ludwig, but as mythical heroes. From Parsifal, your loyal servant in sorrow. From Lohengrin, knight of swan and sigh, your courtiers begin to fear that the king is slipping. And yet your vision never wavers. Neuschwanstein becomes your altar, your legacy, your monument to the unreachable. It stands half-finished but fully alive, like a waking dream that refuses to fade. You no longer care if it's completed. You only care that it exists. You visit it less often now, not because you've lost interest, but because you don't want to see it invaded by practicality, engineers with measuring tools, bureaucrats with reports. You'd rather imagine it as finished than risk seeing it compromised. One evening, as you walk alone through the Hall of the Singers, the moonlight spills across the floor in silver streaks. You hum a line from Parsifal. Your footsteps echo, slow and solemn. No one else is there. And in that moment, the castle is exactly what you always wanted it to be. A place out of time. Why here? You stand on a ledge, wind tugging at your cloak, eyes fixed on a narrow spine of rock that juts from the mountain like a broken tooth. Below you, the valley spills out in silence. Pine forests, glacial streams, and tiny farms scattered like crumbs in the green. This is the site, not the valley floor, not the nearby village with its sensible access roads and eager mason snow. This is where you insist the castle must rise. And when your architects protest gently, nervously you wave a gloved hand and mutter something about the line of sight from God. You're very into lines of sight these days. Neuschwanstein isn't just being built for beauty. It must be situated precisely, framed against the Alps, invisible from the mundane, high enough to evoke legend, low enough not to lose oxygen. Just barely. The locals shake their heads. Only Ludwig would build a castle where the goats complain about altitude. But you don't hear them. You're already sketching. You can't explain it, not really. This need for height, for remoteness. Maybe it's the old dream again that a king might look out from his tower and forget that time marches on, that empires crumble, that his own mind may be coming undone. Historians still argue about the symbolism of the location. Was it spiritual? Was it a way to isolate? Was Eitlitz, be honest, just for the vibes? But from your perspective, it's obvious. The real world is down there. You want to be up here. Of course, this makes building Neuschwanstein nearly impossible. The terrain is jagged. The weather is unpredictable. Transporting materials is a nightmare. Every load of stone must be hauled by oxen, up a narrow mountain path that becomes a mudslide at the faintest drizzle. Winter brings ice, spring brings floods, and your schedule brings panic. One poor engineer faints while calculating how to stabilize the foundation against a shifting bedrock. Another quietly suggests choosing a more convenient site. You stare at him with such wounded disappointment that he never speaks again in your presence. But somehow, through sweat and stubbornness, it begins. You station yourself nearby. In Hohenschwangauth childhood castle, you once haunted like a lonely ghost. From there, you make evening rides to oversee construction, arriving in dramatic fashion, often in a custom-built sleigh shaped like a swan, bells chiming gently in the alpine air. Your presence on site is not always helpful. You ask for last-minute changes, then change your changes. You pace through unfinished corridors mumbling about divine acoustics and demand to know why the mountain light doesn't strike the stained glass with appropriate melancholy. At one point, you ask that a hallway be rotated slightly so that the sunrise hits it at a more romantic angle. The workers begin referring to the castle as the Mountain Theater. Some affectionately, some less so. And yet, their work is astonishing. The stonework is painstakingly detailed. The carpentry is nearly operatic. Tower after tower rises like frozen music. Even the scaffolding looks noble in the fog. Meanwhile, you continue funding the project in increasingly creative ways. You sell off heirlooms, you take out personal loans, you consider briefly crowdfunding, or at least the 19th century version of it, which mostly involves letters to suspiciously wealthy distant cousins. Your ministers are horrified. You reassure them by promising that future tourists will make it all back. They blink. Tourists? Yes. You've begun to suspect that one day Neuschwanstein will be open to the public. Not now, of course. Now it is your sacred retreat. But later? Later, the world might need a place like this. A castle that tells a story too large to live in. That line of thinking doesn't help your political case. By now, your reclusiveness is near total. You answer correspondence once every few weeks, usually in the form of poetic manifestos. You stop attending court entirely. When summoned to Munich, you send a pair of gloves and a note that reads, "The kingdom is in excellent hands." You are not joking. The public starts to whisper. Some say you're a saint. Some say you're possessed. One local legend claims you are building the castle not for yourself, but for a returning Grail Knight, who will one day descend from the heavens to reclaim Bavaria's soul. You don't correct them. You do, however, start redesigning the throne room ceiling just in case. The irony, of course, is that while you build upwards, your reputation slides downwards. Even your staunchest defenders in the court begin to worry. Your expenses now exceed not just reason, but math. You owe everyone. You hide in fog and lace, crafting a dream no one else can inhabit. And yet there's something noble about it. No matter how impractical the castle, no matter how extreme the site, no one can deny its beauty. Even half-finished, it feels eternal. Like it has always been here, waiting to be discovered. You stand at the edge of a balcony one night, clouds swirling below you like a sea. The stars are pale tonight. A servant approaches, hesitant, holding some message from Munich. You wave it away. The only message you care about is the one you're leaving in stone. The one that says, "A king lived here once. He dreamed too much." And somehow, it mattered. It starts to rain. Not a storm. Not a dramatic, operatic downpour with thunder and flashing skies worthy of Wagner. Just the dull, persistent Bavarian sort gray, drizzly, and oddly polite. The kind that turns mountains into waterfalls and workers into ghosts in rain-smudged coats. Mud swallows carts. Stone becomes slick. Progress slows to a theatrical crawl. You're not pleased. From your perch at Hohenschwangau, you gaze out toward the rising spires of Neuschwanstein, shrouded in mist and half-built scaffolding. It looks beautiful, almost too beautiful. A castle, not quite real. And that's the problem. It still isn't finished. You summon your architect. He arrives, drenched, hat in hand. You ask him about the delay in the throne room, vaulting. He talks about weather, supplies, the usual excuses. You interrupt to ask if the blue in the ceiling mural is the right kind of sadness. He stares at you. You nod, satisfied with the silence. Construction is chaos now. Every stone requires an argument, every delivery a prayer. The path up the mountain is barely passable. Horses refuse it. Oxen groan. You begin experimenting with pulley systems, human chains, even imported Norwegian sledges. You consider building a small railway just to move chandeliers. Meanwhile, you're redesigning. Again, the original plans are revised daily. A tower shifts slightly left. A mural is repainted to add more melancholy in the night's expression. A spiral staircase now leads to a stained glass alcove that serves no purpose except to reflect morning light in a pensive way. Historians still debate whether you were simply indecisive or whether Neuschwanstein was never meant to be finished at all. Some say it was a living project tone meant to evolve with your moods. Others say the constant changes were an unconscious method of sabotage. After all, a castle still under construction never has to live up to the fantasy. Your workers do their best. They are skilled, loyal, occasionally mutinous. A few begin composing folk songs about the castle that grows but never grows up. You hear one in passing and smile. You don't mind. Songs are good. Songs last longer than kings. One particularly bad week, 3 walls collapse in a storm. You show up the next morning, utterly calm, and request that the ruins be turned into an open-air terrace for philosophical reflection. No one argues. At this point, you rarely visit the lower levels. The grand staircase is unfinished, and you prefer entering through the private servant's path near the rear courtyard. You pad softly through half-lit hallways, murmuring to yourself, sometimes to Wagner, sometimes to angels. The workers have stopped asking who you're talking to. You now spend hours in what will be the singer's hall, standing under makeshift scaffolding, arms folded, watching as painters craning their necks, like tortured saints attempt to finish scenes from Parzival. You occasionally offer gentle direction, like, could his longing be more eternal? You eat little. You sleep less. You dream vividly. Then try to explain your dreams to carpenters who mostly nod and hope for overtime pay. And yet progress. Slow, reluctant, miraculous. The towers take shape. The rooms echo less. The floors no longer creak with every step. You begin to believe, just faintly, that you might one day actually live here. So you move a few things in. A writing desk, some books, a swan-shaped inkwell. You assign rooms names like the Room of Noble Sadness and Hall of Wounded Beauty. You install a velvet throne at the end of a hallway and sit in it occasionally, alone, listening to the wind draft through unsealed windows. You hold no audiences, no balls, no meetings. This is not a royal court. It's a sanctuary. Yours and yours alone. Ministers continue sending letters. You continue ignoring them. The debt grows. So does the worry. In Munich, they draft documents, petitions, secret diagnoses. You are unwell, they say. Unfit. A danger to national dignity. But none dare confront you yet, because no matter how odd your habits, no matter how strange your visions, Neuschwanstein is becoming real, and its presence, its sheer existence, is somehow intoxicating. Tourists still gather at the base. Artists sketch. Poets sigh. One English traveler writes, "It is like a castle from a dream that has mistaken itself for reality." Another refers to it as a ghost made of marble. Back inside, you're considering adding another tower. Why? Because the light, at a certain hour, casts a shadow in the courtyard that you find a bit too predictable. At one point, you attempt to build a mirrored observatory on the roof, but it collapses in a minor avalanche. You are undeterred. You simply declare it a beautiful failure and have the space turned into a meditation platform. More days slip by. The work never stops, but it never seems to finish either. Rooms open into rooms. Halls lead to silence. Ceilings hang with chandeliers that were designed for opera houses, not mountain castles. Everything glitters and glows, but nothing quite settles. You wander through it all like a monk in his own cathedral, content to never reach the end. After all, you think, once a dream is complete, doesn't it stop being a dream? By now, you've gone fully immersive. Every inch of Neuschwanstein is curated to echo your inner world. It's no longer just architecture, it's autobiography in stone, velvet, and stained glass. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the interiors. Step into the castle now, and you're stepping directly into your mind. The moment you pass through the grand entrance, it begins. Murals everywhere. They don't depict wars or conquests or dull royal lineages. No, they show legends. Lohengrin arriving on a swan boat. Parsifal wandering through enchanted forests. Tannhäuser climbing the Venusberg. Your life is a gallery of myth. You instructed the artists yourself, sometimes in detail, sometimes in riddles. You paced behind them as they painted, asking whether they could make the sky look more like longing. They nodded, adjusted a few brushstrokes, and hoped you'd move on to the next room. And the rooms. Oh, the rooms. Let's start with the king's bedroom. It's not just a bedroom, it's an altar to insomnia. The canopy over your bed is hand-carved oak, dripping with Gothic details, miniature pinnacles, saints, and lilies. It took 14 woodworkers more than 4 years to finish. You sleep here occasionally, draped in royal blue, surrounded by candlelight and frescoes of doomed lovers. Next, the Hall of the Singers. It stretches nearly the entire length of the fourth floor, an enormous space, not meant for politics or banquets, but for performances that never actually happen. A stage dominates one end. Murals wrap the walls in golden scenes of poetry and purity. No audience ever sits here. No applause. Just you, standing in the center, absorbing the echo of silence. You designed it based on the hall in Wartburg Castle, where the real Minnesingers once competed in song centuries ago. Historians still argue whether you ever truly expected anyone to perform there or, if like so much else, it was simply your stage for imagining. Then, the grotto. Yes, the grotto. Between your salon and study, you built a fake cave. It's dim, damp, and lit with colored stage lights to simulate a magical underground lair. It has an artificial waterfall and a small lake where a swan boat once sat, waiting for you to climb in and drift through your fantasies. Who builds a grotto in the middle of their house? You do, and it's glorious. No one questions you anymore. They just build what you dream. The throne room, Thoha. The throne room is different. It's sacred. Modeled on Byzantine cathedrals, it features a sunburst mosaic floor, lofty arched ceilings, and rows of columns that gleam like polished bone. But as we've said before, there's no throne. Just a dais, 7 marble steps, gold everywhere. People speculate. Was it humility? A message that only God deserved to sit there? Or was it a metaphor? a deliberate absence, because no earthly throne could hold the dreams you carried. Whatever the answer, the room hums with silence, like something waiting. And then there are the little touches, the chandeliers shaped like crowns, the secret doors hidden in paneling, the wall-mounted candle holders fashioned to look like angel wings. Every door you open leads not to another room, but to another fragment of your imagination. Even the dining room, when its Euclidus bathed in melancholy. You often dine alone, meals delivered through a dumbwaiter to avoid servants having to speak. A silver cover is lifted. You eat in silence, staring into a mural of the Holy Grail. Guests are rare. Conversation, rarer. You write in your journals more. Long passages about beauty, decay, and eternal youth. You compose private prayers. You sign them as the uncrowned of the spirit. And yet even as your mind turns inward, the world continues peeking in. Tourists still try to glimpse the interiors. Rumors fly. Newspapers publish half-true accounts of swan-shaped beds and gold-plated ceilings. Some say you've gone mad. Others call you a saint. Most just want to see the grotto. Ministers, meanwhile, are keeping score. They list the rooms that serve no function, the corridors that curve for no reason, the endless expenses for murals, gold leaf, custom furniture, and bizarre acoustical experiments. You've spent enough to fund a small city. They begin speaking of evaluations, of inquiries, of intervention, but you barely notice. You've almost achieved it, the perfect escape. The dream is no longer a thing you return to at night. It's where you live now. Every hallway, a memory. Every fresco, a secret. Every creaking floorboard, a verse from a Wagner aria. Still, you feel something shifting. The air is different, the light thinner. You sleep even less, wander even more. You begin talking to portraits, and not in the charming, eccentric way. One servant reports seeing you kneel before a painting of Lohengrin and whisper, "Tell me how to go home." But you are home, at least, in the version you built. A version where pain can be transformed into beauty, where isolation feels holy, and where unfinished dreams are allowed to live forever, because completion, you now understand, is death for a fantasy. You sit one night beneath a mural of the Holy Grail, tracing your fingers across the gold lines, and smile. Because this room, this ceiling, this breathless silence, it was never meant for kings. It was meant for the part of you that never had to explain itself. There's a knock at the door. You don't answer it. You rarely do anymore. It could be a servant, or a courier, or perhaps a minister with another urgent letter you'll never read. It doesn't matter. You're deep in thought, watching a beam of morning light land just right on a golden tile in your study. It flickers there like a whispered promise, and for a moment, you wonder if anyone else will notice it when you're gone. This is the beginning of your slow vanishing. Not literally, you're still here, still writing orders, still wandering the halls of your many palaces like a baritone searching for his next aria. But you're less present, less attached. The real world continues knocking. You simply choose not to open the door. You've started spending more time at Linderhof again. It's smaller, easier to control. Neuschwanstein overwhelms even you now. Too many voices, too many shadows. At Linderhof, the days are silent, the fountains obedient, the mirrors endless. You live by candlelight. You reverse your sleep schedule entirely. Daylight is a burden. You begin working only at night, writing long, meandering letters filled with questions no one will answer, and signing them with titles you made up on the spot. King of Dreams. Guardian of the Secret Moon. Even your most loyal advisors are confused. You've stopped trusting your ministers. You shuffle them around, Replace them with obscure bureaucrats or childhood acquaintances. You once gave a key position to a man whose only qualification was having a beautiful singing voice. Your world shrinks. Your rituals grow stranger. You now take meals alone in the garden grotto, wearing a black cloak, surrounded by flickering lamps. You ask for music to be piped in from a nearby room, but only Parsifal, and only the parts where the hero suffers in silence. Historians still argue whether your behavior was theatrical, symptomatic, or both. You begin giving orders in whispers. You ask your servants to walk softly, even on gravel. You commission new curtains because the existing ones do not filter sorrow appropriately. You ask for carpets that resemble falling snow. One evening, a servant finds you standing motionless in the throne room at Neuschwanstein, staring up at the domed ceiling, whispering, "Almost." You leave before anyone can ask what you mean. By now, your court is effectively dissolved. You see no one unless absolutely necessary. Government is run by proxy, and even those proxies are unsure what's real and what's royal whimsy. Letters from Berlin pile up unopened. Bavarian nobles begin murmuring in back rooms. Something must be done, they say. This is no longer eccentricity, it's abdication in all but name. The ministers draft reports, memoranda, secret evaluations by court-appointed physicians, and still you disappear further. You begin inventing projects. More castles, another grotto, a marble temple to be built on a cliffside, accessible only by pulley. Nothing is ever finished. The plans pile up like snowdrifts. You still visit Neuschwanstein, but you no longer stay. You walk through it like a visitor to your own memory. The workers, exhausted, keep at it. Some rooms are now fully finished, gilded, polished, glowing. Others remain frozen in scaffolding, murals half-painted, ceilings exposed like the ribcage of a sleeping god. You never seem to mind. The throne remains absent. By now, your debts have reached such heights that even your bankers have stopped blinking. You owe more than any king in Europe. Your personal accounts are drained. Your credit is threadbare. Your castles are filled with priceless art, and yet you, personally, are almost bankrupt. Ministers call emergency meetings. A decision is made. Quietly, carefully. You must be removed. Not with violence, not with scandal, just gently. They begin compiling evidence. A medical case, anonymous affidavits, reports of your night rides, your candlelit meals with imaginary guests, your whispered conversations with murals. And so, on a gray June evening in 1886, they move. A delegation of doctors, officials, and reluctant nobles arrives at Neuschwanstein. You're not there. You're at Berg Castle, your summer retreat near the lake. They follow you. They bring with them a letter. A formal declaration of mental unfitness, signed by your own uncle. The diagnosis is pre-written. You have not been examined. You are officially deposed. They confront you late at night. The windows are open. You're seated in your study, wearing a white robe, writing a letter to no one. When they read the declaration aloud, you smile, calmly fold your letter and say, "Who dares call me mad? Who has not stood where I have stood?" They hesitate. But the papers are in order. You are placed under guard. The news spreads quickly, first among ministers, then throughout Bavaria. The people are confused. Some are angry. Some laugh nervously. Some shrug. He was odd, they say, but harmless, but kind, but surely not mad. You're taken back to Berg Castle, now not as a guest but as a prisoner. The windows are locked. The letters are intercepted. The world, once so full of myth and beauty, has narrowed to 4 silent walls. You ask to go for a walk by the lake. They allow it. A doctor accompanies you. Neither of you returns. The lake lies still. It is the 13th of June, 1886 early evening, and the air at Lake Starnberg is thick with that particular silence only found before something irreversible. A stillness that presses against your skin like glass. You're walking slowly along the shore with Dr. Gooden, the court psychiatrist who has signed off on your removal from the throne. He walks beside you, hesitant but determined, occasionally glancing toward the trees as if expecting an answer from them. You, Ludwig, are calm, calmer than anyone expected. You've said little since arriving under guard. Your letters have been confiscated, your attendants replaced. Your world has been folded, boxed, and labeled unstable. Still, you walk. You and Gooden were allowed this brief walk unaccompanied, which now seems astonishing in hindsight. Two Menonais, a deposed king, with a known fondness for midnight solitude. The other, a physician who had only observed his royal patient from afar now, pacing the gravel path with no witnesses. The sun begins to dip behind the trees. At some point, the guards lose sight of you. Ours, passe. By nightfall, the alarm is raised. Search parties comb the grounds. Lanterns swing through the trees. Dogs are brought in. The lake laps gently against its banks. Patient, secretive. It isn't until late that your bodies are found floating just offshore, the water silent around them. You are dead. So is Gooden. No one knows how it happened. Historians still argue whether it was suicide, murder, accident, or something stranger. The official cause of death is drowning. But there are no signs of struggle on your body. No water in your lungs. No bruises. No farewell note. Gooden's corpse, however, bears injuries. Scratches. Bruising. As if he fought, or was pushed. And so the theories begin. Did you try to escape? Did you lash out in desperation? Did you walk into the lake knowing it would never let you leave? Or more eerily, was there someone else? A hidden hand? A staged ending? No one ever finds out. What they do find, after the news breaks, is a kingdom stunned into silence. In Munich, ministers glance at each other across quiet desks. Some feel relief, others guilt. All sense that something irreversible has happened, something far greater than the simple dethronement of an eccentric king. In the countryside, people weep. In the villages below Neuschwanstein, black flags are hung. And on the mountain, the workers stop. For the first time in years, the hammers are quiet. The castle stands frozen. Rooms half finished. Paintings half completed. A marble throne room with no throne. Draperies not yet hung. And yet, it's all there, everything you dreamed of, even if only partly shaped. Word spreads quickly that the fairy tale king is gone. They call you mad. They call you tragic. They call you romantic. But mostly, they call you theirs. Unser Kini, our king. Tourists arrive within days. Yes, days. The ministers, ever pragmatic, open Neuschwanstein to the public before your body is even buried. They need money. Fast. The debts are vast, the royal treasury nearly empty, and the people are hungry for a glimpse of what you left behind. And so they come. On foot, by carriage, through mountain mist and muddy paths, they climb to see the impossible place. And they're stunned. Even unfinished, even hollow in places, the castle stirs something in them. It feels like magic. Or mourning. Or both. Inside, the halls still smell faintly of paint. Candles flicker beside murals of lonely knights and shining grails. In the throne room, visitors look up and say nothing. There is nothing to say. It is beautiful. It is incomplete. It is exactly as you left it. The tour guide speaks softly. No one laughs. Children tug on their mother's skirts and ask why the king built such a big house just for himself. The mothers don't know what to say. How do you explain a man who dreamed so loudly the whole world had to stop and listen? At your funeral, the ceremony is brief, efficient, political. You are buried in the crypt of St. Michael's Church in Munich, far from your mountaintop dream. The priests mumble through their prayers. The ministers avoid eye contact. But outside, the people gather. Thousands of them. Some carry flowers. Others, sketches of your castles. One old man brings a toy swan carved from pine. He places it gently by the church doors. Years pass. Neuschwanstein becomes famous. More famous than you could have ever imagined. It appears in books, in postcards, in paintings, and eventually in movies. A certain animation company will one day model its most iconic castle after yours. They'll call it a fairy tale. They won't know how accurate that is. But those first years, they belong to the people. School children visit. Travelers weep. Architects study the floor plans with wonder and disbelief. Philosophers write about longing. Poets write about grief. And all of them, in some way, are writing about you. The dreamer, the builder, the man who could not finish the castle because he was part of the architecture himself. Time, that old intruder, keeps walking for Wardaven without you. But the castle remains. Neuschwanstein, once a private escape, is now very much public. The gates are open daily. The velvet ropes are installed. The tourists shuffle in, some reverent, some clueless. They come in rain and sunshine, in sandals and winter boots, to see the dream of a man they've only read about on pamphlets. You King Ludwig III, now an exhibit. There is a certain irony here. The king who couldn't bear to speak to guests now welcomes thousands every week. The man who built secret doors and lit only candles now sees his halls bathed in fluorescent exit signs and polite murmurs in multiple languages. But if you could see it, would you be angry? Maybe not. Because even if it's crowded, even if it's noisy, the dream is still there. Weaker. Perhaps. Distilled. But not gone. Not erased. They see the murals. They see the Hall of the Singers. They walk beneath the empty dais in the throne room and pause, always, to look at the golden mosaic sunburst overhead. Some still ask, "Where's the throne?" And the guide shrugs. There never was one. Your absence is louder than any artifact. Meanwhile, your legend grows. The press, once so cruel, turns you into myth. Novels are written. Plays. Eventually films. Some focus on your madness. Others on your vision. Historians bicker at conferences. Was he truly insane? Was he gay? Was he murdered? Was he simply born into the wrong century? But no one denies the feeling. The feeling that something in you, something impossible and wounded and beautiful was real, and that it lives here. In stone, and wood, and star-patterned ceilings. Back in Munich, the ministers who removed you are largely forgotten. Their ledgers, their reports, their calculations all gather dust. But your debts? Your debts are paid off within a decade. The very thing they feared would bankrupt the state becomes its most profitable tourist attraction. The irony, one assumes, is not lost on you wherever you are. Linderhof, your smaller palace, also opens to the public. As does Herrenchiemsee, your extravagant, but incomplete imitation of Versailles, rising like a golden hallucination from its quiet island. People visit all three now, calling them Ludwig's castles, as if you were a brand. And maybe, in some way, you are. But Neuschwanstein is the crown jewel, even in its unfinished state, or perhaps because of it. There's something eternal about things left incomplete. They offer space for imagination, for longing, for possibility. Your empty throne becomes more powerful than any seated king. Your missing murals speak louder than finished ones. You are everywhere and nowhere. Still, scholars keep digging. They publish papers. The Psychology of Ludwig II. Architecture as Escapism. Monarchy and Mythopoetics in 19th century Bavaria. They try to define you in footnotes and italics. But the tourists strangely understand better. They don't need analysis. They walk the corridors, feel the hush, see the paintings of knights who never lived, and somehow know this was someone's dream. Sometimes that's enough. A few decades after your death, as Bavaria transitions through wars, revolutions, and reunifications, Neuschwanstein remains untouched. Bombers avoid it during World War II. Some say it was marked on Allied maps as too beautiful to destroy. Others claim pure luck. Either way, it survives. And with it, so do you. In the 1940s, it's briefly used to store stolen Nazi art. For a moment, the dream is warped. But the art is returned, the halls cleaned, and your legend resumes its slow, shimmering expansion. By the 21st century, over 1 million visitors a year file through your dreamscape. Some take selfies, some get engaged, some cry. One American teenager describes the experience as like stepping into a dream I didn't know I had. Another child, clutching a plastic swan toy from the gift shop, whispers to his dad, "Did a real king live here?" The father hesitates. "Sort of," he says. "He tried to. Your name is everywhere, no one, posters, coins, history books, opera programs. But still, the question lingers. Who were you? Were you a failed monarch? A madman with a paintbrush? A misunderstood visionary? Or simply perhaps most powerfully a mirror? A mirror in which we see the part of ourselves that longs for stillness, for story, for a room with perfect morning light that lands, just so, on the corner of a golden tile. They say kings rule. But you? You imagined? And in the end, your imagination ruled far longer than your crown ever did. The castle echoes differently now. It's quieter, somehow. Not just because the footsteps have softened over the years, worn down the stones, rounded the corners of once crisp murals, but because time itself has slowed here. Like Neuschwanstein exists slightly out of sync, a breath behind the modern world, as though it still waits for something. Or someone. You're not here, of course. Not physically. But your presence is baked into every inch of the place. Your choices, your obsessions, your sleepless whispers, to unseen nights they linger. You are part of the atmosphere now, somewhere between dust motes and melody. And yet, while the world remembers you through postcards and paintings, there's another story that only a few people know. The last months of your life, those strange, dark, flickering days when you drifted between castles like a ghost in your own life. You were no longer ruling. You were hardly speaking. You wrote long, looping letters to Wagner, who barely responded. You spent days designing rooms no one would ever enter. You asked your attendants to address you as Your Radiance. You signed documents with the names of mythical kings. You stopped writing. That was the real signal, because writing was your rhythm, your peace. You used to take off at dusk fur-lined cloak billowing behind you, hooves striking sparks from gravel, eyes locked on the treetops like they were guiding stars. But in those final weeks, you barely stirred. And when you did, it was slow, like you were waiting to turn into stone yourself. Your servants noticed, but they said nothing. Out of loyalty, or fear, or some kind of sleepy compassion. They brought you your meal soon eaten. They turned down your bedtime slept in. They watched you stand for hours in the throne room, staring at the space where the throne should have been. Historians still debate your state of mind. Diagnoses range from depression to schizophrenia to florid eccentricity. But none quite fit, because you weren't exactly gone. You just slipped sideways into something else. You read less, wrote more, filled pages with notes about light direction in the Hall of the Stars, or necessary sorrow in the velvet tone, or conversations with Parsifal in dreams. It's the dreams people don't talk about. The few who served you closely near the end described them in hushed tones. They said you would wake and begin speaking to someone no one could see. That you insisted a knight had visited you every night, telling you to prepare. That the castle was nearly ready, and when it was, the king could return. Of course, no one believed you. But you did. You believed it so deeply that you began sleeping upright, dressed in white, waiting. You lit candles in the windows. You wrote farewell letters that began, "When the world wakes, I shall not be in it." And then, the lake. That final walk, that final silence. Was it a final surrenderer and escape? The truth is, no one knows. But the final days left behind an echo in your castles. A quiet grief. Not just for you, but for what you represented. The last king who dared to resist reality by building dreams instead of armies. And yet, Neuschwanstein lived on. Unlike so many royal fantasies, yours did not crumble with your death. No revolution tore it down. No fire swept through its halls. It stood, unfinished, but strong. The public loved it from the start, because it was yours, but also because it was theirs. Instantly, deeply, somehow. The people who had never spoken to you, never understood you, now crowded the gates just to see what you'd built. Not for power, not for glory, but for longing. Children left drawings at the castle gates. Old women brought candles. One man returned every year on the anniversary of your death to sit quietly beneath the windows of the Hall of the Singers. He said the echo helped him think. Meanwhile, your story grew stranger in the retelling. You became everything romantic, mad, holy, haunted. In France, you were called Le Roi Fantometh Ghost King. In Japan, you were admired as an icon of misunderstood beauty. In Germany, you became a symbol of art's rebellion against power. Your portraits were printed, your signature mimicked on souvenirs, your words stitched onto scarves. I want to remain an eternal enigma to myself and to others. You got your wish, and through it all, the castle stood. Each winter, it wore a crown of snow. Each summer, it shimmered through morning mists. Tourists arrived by the millions. And always, the question, who was this king? The guides answered politely. The walls answered more truthfully. Because if you stop in the Hall of the Singers, late in the day, when the light slants through the stained glass just right, you can almost hear it, the echo of footsteps that walked without purpose, the hush of a dream not quite spoken aloud. And maybe, just maybe, that echo still waits, not for tourists, but for you. Even now, after all these years, the lake still reflects everything. That's the strange thing about water, it remembers. Long after the newspapers stop printing your name, after the ministers retire, after the last painter folds away their easel and goes home, the lake just keeps reflecting. On quiet evenings, when the wind is still, it's said you can see the castle there. Not Neuschwanstein, but something older, stranger. A reflection of the castle as you imagined it, not as it was built, but as it lived in your mind, gilded, endless, candlelit forever. A place untouched by time or tourists. A castle waiting for a king who would never come. Your death, of course, changed everything. The mystery of it was irresistible. 2 bodies, 1 lake, 1 diagnosis, scribbled before anyone even looked you in the eye. There were whispers of plots off, a royal cover-up, of a desperate escape gone wrong, of a political assassination by candlelight. Even now, historians still argue whether your end was orchestrated or chosen. The official story? You drowned. But you were a strong swimmer. The water was shallow, and the bruises on Dr. Gooden's body didn't quite add up. They say the only thing more powerful than a crown is a secret. And you, Ludwig, left behind the greatest secret of your life at the moment of your death. It ensured your immortality. After your body was pulled from the lake, the court scrambled to compose itself. Your possessions were catalogued. Your unfinished letters locked away. Your castles open for business. Neuschwanstein, barely complete, was cleaned, polished, and turned into a museum within weeks. And what a museum it was. Visitors wandered the corridors in disbelief. Everything felt too beautiful, too strange, too personal. Like they were trespassing in someone's private dream. There was no throne. There was no royal seal on the door. There was only you everywhere. In the murals, in the chandeliers, in the oddly shaped doors that led nowhere, and the staircases that curved like a question no one wanted to answer. They saw the stories on the walls. Parsifal, Lohengrin, Tannhäuser, but they didn't need to know the operas to feel it. The yearning, the loneliness, the impossible hope that beauty could defeat reality if only for a little while. And so, a strange thing happened. You became beloved. Not just in the way kings are loved, but in the way poets are mourned. People who'd once called you mad, now called you misunderstood. The quiet king, the dream king, the lost monarch of the mountains. They said you had no interest in power. They were wrong. You just had no interest in their version of power. You built your own kingdom, one that didn't require armies or parliaments, one where imagination was law and sorrow was a form of royalty. You ruled not through orders but through beauty. And it worked. Neuschwanstein became the most visited castle in the world. It paid for itself, many times over. It paid your debts. It outlived the empire that once feared your spending. You, Ludwig, the supposed failure, the inconvenient dreamer, the man they removed for being unstable, ended up giving Bavaria its most enduring symbol. Tourists didn't come for the politicians. They came for you. For the vision. For the echo. Your critics were buried in silence. But your castle? It was photographed by millions. So what do we make of you now? Were you a genius? A tragic figure? A soft-spoken lunatic with excellent taste? Does it matter? Because here's what remains. A feeling. People walk through Neuschwanstein and feel something. A slow hush. A sense of awe. A flicker of wonder that maybe, just maybe, there's room in the world for dreams too big to live in. And when they ask about the king, the guides lower their voices and say, "He died young. He died mysteriously." But what they mean is, he died trying to build something that couldn't quite be finished. Trying to live in a story that no one else believed in. Trying to make beauty sacred again. And somehow, despite everything, you succeeded. Because Neuschwanstein doesn't need an ending. It is the ending. So now you drift half memory, half myth. Not just in the castle, though it remains your most obvious echo. You also linger in letters, in lullabies, in candlelit performances of Wagner that pause, just briefly, when the tenor sings a line you once quoted by heart. You're in the silence between acts, in the spaces unfinished, in the footsteps of the traveler who doesn't quite know why they climbed this far. And still, Neuschwanstein waits. Not to be completed, not really. That was never the point. The West Wing was never finished. Some of the planned murals were never painted. The marble for your throne never arrived. The chapel remained an empty blueprint. And yet it doesn't feel lacking. If anything, the incompleteness is part of the spell, because dreams that finish are dreams that end, and yours never did. They hang in the air like incense faint, persistent, sacred. The swan-shaped sconces flicker. The red silk curtains sigh in their velvet stillness. The whisper of paintbrushes that stopped mid-stroke still haunts the corridor near the Hall of the Singers. Even the workers, long gone, seem to have left a residue. Their sweat, their frustration, their disbelief at your instruction saul somehow baked into the mortar. A kind of reverent exhaustion. And every now and then, someone new sees it. A visitor. They turn a corner, step into a hallway of carved oak and candlelight, and freeze, because they've never seen anything quite like it. Not because it's the most luxurious, but because it's the most felt. A hallway built not to impress, but to transport. A bedroom not for sleeping, but for dreaming. A throne room not for ruling, but for yearning. And that's the trick, isn't it? You didn't want power. You wanted meaning. You didn't crave subjects. You craved silence. You didn't ask for glory. You asked for stillness. And maybe, just maybe, for someone to stand beside you in that stillness and say, I see it too. Of course, you never really got that. Not while you were alive. Wagner left. Ministers betrayed. Friends faded. Even your family distanced themselves, calling you peculiar behind closed doors. And yet, in death, you gathered your court. A strange one, to be sure. Your courtiers are now tourists, scholars, artists, writers, dreamers. People who feel things a little too deeply. People who don't quite fit. People who walk through Neuschwanstein and feel, somehow, that it was made for them. That's your legacy. Not policy, not treaties, not heirs or armies or territorial gains, but resonance. You resonate with the misfits. You gave beauty permission to be excessive. You gave sorrow a throne. And every year, more people come to thank you. They don't say it aloud. That would be odd. But they do. In the way they pause a little too long in the throne room. In the way they place their palms gently on the carved balcony rail. In the way they whisper to their children, "Can you believe someone lived here?" Someone did. You did. Not in the way most people live. Not in timelines or accomplishments or perfect health. But in intensity. In devotion. In a kind of luminous sadness that refuses to flicker out. Even now, your castle is not quiet. It hums, softly, with footfalls, with whispered stories, with the rustle of fabric as someone turns slowly in the Hall of the Singers, trying to take it all in. And maybe, just maybe, with something more, because some claim they felt you, not seen felt. A shift in air, a sudden warmth in the grotto, a faint sigh near the window when the moonlight lands just right. And whether it's real or not, they believe. They believe because you believed. And belief, it turns out, is more enduring than stone. So even if your portrait fades on the wall, even if your statues gather dust, even if your name is eventually pronounced wrong by some overworked tour guide on a rainy afternoon, you'll still be here. Not in marble, not in myth, but in the quiet hearts of those who look at something impossible and feel less alone. The years continue, folding over themselves like pages in a fairy tale that refuses to close. Generations pass. The world changes. Empires fall. New kings rise and are forgotten. Wars scar the land, then vanish into books. Electric lights replace gas lamps. Trains grow faster. Phones ring louder. But still, Neuschwanstein stays. It stands where you left it perched on that unlikely ridge, its towers poking through clouds like questions no one dares answer. The roads leading to it are now paved. The swan-drawn sleigh is long gone, replaced by tour buses and digital tickets. But the awe remains untouched. A million visitors a year now walk where you once paced. They cross the same thresholds you crossed barefoot in silence. They linger beneath ceilings that made you cry. They pause in front of murals you once directed with trembling fingers. Many of them don't know your name. Not really. They might glance at it on the guidebook, struggle to pronounce it, then move on. But something pulls them forward anyway. Something ancient. Something gentle. Something unfinished. That's the secret, isn't it? Your life ended before your story did. And because of that, we keep telling it. You were a man who refused to compromise with the world, and in doing so, you created a new one. A world not of kings and courtiers, but of mist and music, velvet and echoes. You weren't building a castle. You were building a mood. And moods, Ludwig, do not die. Even now, when the castle doors creak open each morning and guests flood the halls, they speak softly without quite knowing why. The space demands it. The light demands it. The hush between footsteps demands it. In the hall of the singers, no music plays but everyone hears something. In the throne room, the throne remains missing but everyone feels it. And in the grotto, the quietest of all, you're still there. Not seen, not heard, but somehow present. Like the castle itself is exhaling slowly, patiently waiting for a king who simply stepped into another room. Outside, the seasons pass. The mountains bloom, burn, frost and thaw. The pine trees that once whispered to you grow taller than ever. The fog still rolls down the slopes like smoke from forgotten bonfires. And the lake, the one that kept your final secret, remains unchanged, still and reflective, as though it, too, remembers. And now, in the quiet night, with only the sound of wind brushing stone and distant chimes from the valley below, you drift slowly through the castle one last time. You trail your fingers along carved wood that once gleamed new. You glance through glass windows that caught the sunrise in 1886, and still do now. You pass through doorways of golden archways that never got their companion walls. The past is here, but so is the present. You've threaded them together, and you smile, because in the end, your unfinished castle did exactly what it was meant to do. It made people feel something. It made people pause. It made people dream. And maybe, just maybe, that's all any of us can hope to build. And now, with the story gently folded and the lights low, we return to stillness. The castle fades behind us, just a silhouette now, nestled in the mists of memory. The walls grow soft. The towers dissolve into clouds. And the wind carries only silence. The dream is over, but it isn't gone, because some dreams, like music, never really end. They just grow quiet, waiting for someone else to pick up the melody. Tonight, maybe that someone is you. As you breathe and slowly imagine the sound of footsteps on old stone, the hush of candlelight against velvet, the distant, ghostly echo of a piano in another room, playing a song no one else remembers. With every exhale, let it go. Let the weight of the day drift down the mountain, into the trees. Let the worries soften. Let your mind slow. You're safe now. You're high above the world, nestled in the clouds, far from noise, far from duty. You've wandered through myth, through sadness, through gold-lit corridors built from longing, and now there's only calm. Even the king has gone quiet. Even the story has grown still. And so, you rest. Here, in the echo of a dream that never asked to be understood, only felt. Here, in the heart of a castle that never needed a crown to be complete. Here, where sleep arrives not like an end, but like a door opening. Gently, softly, and endlessly.